On the night of September 7, 1996, one of the most recognizable voices on the planet sat inside a black BMW on the streets of Las Vegas, Nevada. His name was Tupac Amaru Shakur. He was 25 years old. By sunrise, he would be fighting for his life. 6 days later, he would be dead. This was not an isolated act of violence. It was the climax of years of tension, personal, cultural, and criminal, playing out under the brightest spotlight in American music history. Tupac Shakur was more than a rapper. He was an actor, a poet, a provocateur, and a symbol. Loved by millions. Hated by many. Surrounded by loyalty, rivalry, and danger. That night in Las Vegas would become one of the most analyzed crime scenes in modern American history. A case that refused to die, refused to settle, and refused to deliver clear answers for decades. A drive-by shooting. A luxury hotel. A championship boxing match. A fistfight hours before the bullets flew. A white Cadillac that vanished into the night. And for years, no arrest. No conviction. Only rumors, theories, and names whispered behind closed doors. Who really killed Tupac Shakur? Was it retaliation for a fight at the MGM Grand? Was it tied to gang affiliations? Was it fueled by the East Coast, West Coast rivalry that dominated hip-hop in the 1990s? Or was the truth buried beneath fear, silence, and time? For nearly 3 decades, the murder of Tupac Shakur remained officially unsolved, until 2023, when a shocking arrest reignited global attention and reopened questions many believed would never be answered. An arrest that brought one name back into focus. A name that had appeared in police files, media reports, and street conversations for years. But does an arrest mean the full truth has finally come out? Or is this just another chapter in a story built on half-truths, missing witnesses, and long-kept secrets? In this episode of Tales of the Real, we are breaking down everything. We will trace Tupac Shakur's rise from a gifted young artist to a global icon. We will reconstruct the events of September 7, 1996, minute by minute, from the Mike Tyson fight at the MGM Grand to the gunfire on East Flamingo Road. We will examine the investigation, the suspects, the theories, and the evidence that shaped this case. And we will take a close look at the 2023 arrest that changed the conversation around Tupac Shakur's death forever. This is not speculation for shock value. This is documented history, witness accounts, police records, and investigative reporting, all pieced together to understand how one of the most influential artists of all time met a violent end. If you appreciate deep, factual true crime storytelling that doesn't rush to conclusions, hit like right now. It helps more people find this story. Comment if Tupac's music or legacy ever impacted you. And subscribe to Tales of the Real, then hit the bell so you don't miss the full breakdown of this case from beginning to end. Because this story isn't just about how Tupac Shakur died. It's about why, after all these years, the truth still matters. And it starts long before the bullets. Tupac Amaru Shakur was born on June 16, 1971, in New York City. He was named after Tupac Amaru II, an 18th-century revolutionary who led an indigenous uprising against Spanish rule in Peru. A name chosen deliberately, symbolizing resistance, defiance, and struggle. That symbolism would follow him for the rest of his life. Tupac Shakur was born into a family deeply connected to political activism. His mother, Keffe Shakur, was a prominent member of the Black Panther Party. Keffe Shakur was arrested while pregnant with Tupac and later acquitted in the famous Panther 21 case. She represented a generation fighting against systemic racism, police brutality, and inequality in America. Tupac grew up hearing conversations about revolution, oppression, and survival, not as abstract ideas, but as lived reality. His childhood was unstable. The family moved frequently, New York, Baltimore, then California. Money was scarce. Housing was inconsistent. Violence and addiction were not distant concepts, they were present in his environment. Keffe Shakur struggled with substance abuse during parts of Tupac's upbringing, a fact Tupac would later address openly in his music with both pain and compassion. Despite the chaos, something remarkable emerged early. Tupac Shakur began writing poetry as a child. Not as a hobby, but as an outlet. His notebooks were filled with reflections on death, injustice, love, poverty, and identity. Themes that would later define his music were already forming before he ever stepped into a recording studio. When Tupac Shakur moved to Baltimore, Maryland, his life briefly stabilized. There he attended the Baltimore School for the Arts, a prestigious public arts high school. This is a critical detail, often overlooked. Tupac Shakur was formally trained. At the Baltimore School for the Arts, he studied acting, poetry, jazz, theater, classical performance. He performed Shakespeare. He studied ballet. He learned stage presence, vocal projection, and storytelling. Teachers later described him as charismatic, intelligent, and deeply expressive. This version of Tupac Shakur, disciplined, articulate, soft-spoken in class, sharply contrasts with the aggressive image that would later dominate headlines. He wasn't learning how to be a rapper. He was learning how to be an artist. During this period, Tupac Shakur wrote poems about single mothers, social inequality, young black men being criminalized, hope, pain, and survival. Some of those poems would later be published after his death, revealing a side of Tupac many never saw. But life shifted again. In the late 1980s, Tupac Shakur moved with his family to Marin City, California, an area marked by economic hardship, crime, and gang activity. The contrast was stark. From structured arts education to a neighborhood shaped by survival. This environment introduced Tupac to a different reality, one that would heavily influence his later music and public persona. It is here where the contradictions began to form. Tupac Shakur was a trained poet and actor, a politically aware son of a Black Panther, a teenager surrounded by street violence. He absorbed all of it. He didn't abandon his artistic education. He didn't abandon his political awareness. Instead, he blended them. This duality would define Tupac Shakur for the rest of his life. To some, he was a revolutionary voice exposing injustice. To others, he was a controversial figure glorifying violence. But those contradictions didn't appear out of nowhere. They were forged by circumstance. By the time Tupac Shakur entered the music industry, he already carried the language of activism, the discipline of classical training, the anger of lived experience. This is why his music felt different, why his lyrics carried urgency, why he could speak about social issues one moment and raw street survival the next without sounding disconnected. He wasn't playing a role. He was reflecting everything he had lived. Understanding Tupac Shakur's early life is essential to understanding the case itself. Because the man who sat in that car in Las Vegas on September 7, 1996, was shaped long before fame, long before feuds, and long before violence followed him. His background explains why he inspired loyalty, why he provoked hostility, why he refused to stay silent, and why, to this day, his death still feels unresolved, not just as a murder, but as the loss of a voice that represented conflict itself. The activist poet. the provocative rap star. Both existed in Tupac Shakur, and both would eventually collide with a world that was not ready for him. By the early 1990s, Tupac Shakur was no longer just a gifted student or a politically aware poet. He was stepping into a world that would amplify everything he said and punish him for it just as loudly. Tupac Shakur entered the music industry as a member of Digital Underground, a pioneering West Coast hip-hop group known for blending humor with social commentary. His early appearances on tracks and in performances immediately set him apart. He wasn't just rapping. He was speaking directly, with urgency, emotion, and conviction. In 1991, Tupac Shakur released his debut solo album, Tupacalypse Now. The album was raw, confrontational, and unapologetically political. Songs addressed police brutality, systemic racism, poverty, the criminalization of young black men. The album quickly attracted national attention, not just from fans, but from critics and politicians. Public officials condemned the record, accusing Tupac Shakur of promoting violence. But supporters argued the opposite, that he was documenting reality, not creating it. That controversy made Tupac Shakur a recognizable name almost overnight. With fame came scrutiny. In 1993, Tupac Shakur released his second album, Strictly for My Niggas. The album marked a shift. The political edge remained, but the tone grew sharper, more aggressive, and more street-focused. Tracks blended social commentary with gritty realism, reflecting Tupac Shakur's growing immersion in a more dangerous environment. That same year, Tupac Shakur's acting career began to rise. His breakout role came in Juice, 1992, where he played Bishop, a charismatic young man whose descent into violence shocked audiences. The performance was widely praised. Ironically, the role would later be used by critics as proof that Tupac Shakur was becoming what he portrayed. In Poetic Justice, 1993, Tupac Shakur played a sensitive, romantic lead opposite Janet Jackson, a stark contrast to his image in Juice. The film revealed another side of him. Soft-spoken, introspective, vulnerable. This duality confused the public. Which version of Tupac Shakur was real? The answer was uncomfortable. Both were. As Tupac Shakur's visibility increased, so did legal trouble, media pressure, and personal conflict. By 1994, his life was spiraling between success and chaos. That year, Tupac Shakur was shot during a robbery at a recording studio in New York City, a moment that would deepen his distrust of the industry and intensify rivalries. While recovering, he released his third album, Me Against the World, in 1995. The title alone captured his mindset. The album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, making Tupac Shakur the first artist to achieve that milestone while incarcerated. Me Against the World was introspective, vulnerable, and deeply personal. Songs reflected paranoia, betrayal, mortality, and isolation. For many fans and critics, it became his most critically acclaimed work. But peace did not follow success. After his release from prison later in 1995, Tupac Shakur signed with Death Row Records, led by Marion Suge Knight. That decision changed everything. Under Death Row, Tupac Shakur adopted a louder, more confrontational public persona. In 1996, he released All Eyes on Me, a double album that became one of the best-selling hip-hop albums of all time. The title was not subtle. Every move he made was watched. Every word dissected. Every feud magnified. All Eyes on Me solidified Tupac Shakur as a global superstar, but it also placed him at the center of growing industry tensions. Public feuds intensified. Media narratives hardened. Security concerns grew. Tupac Shakur was no longer just an artist. He was a headline. The combination of fame, unresolved conflict, and aggressive public perception placed him in constant proximity to danger. The same intensity that made his music powerful made his life volatile. By the time Tupac Shakur arrived in Las Vegas in September 1996, he was carrying massive success, ongoing feuds, legal pressure, a heightened public profile. This rise to fame didn't protect him. It exposed him. It narrowed his margin for safety. And it set the stage for the night that would define his legacy and his death. Because when the world is watching, every decision matters. And for Tupac Shakur, the consequences were closing in. By the mid-1990s, hip-hop was no longer just music. It was power. It was money. It was influence. And at the center of that power struggle stood two record labels, representing two coasts, pulling the culture in opposite directions. On the West Coast, there was Death Row Records. On the East Coast, there was Bad Boy Records. Death Row Records was led by Marion "Suge" Knight, a towering, intimidating presence in the industry, known for aggressive business tactics and a reputation that blurred the line between music executive and street enforcer. Bad Boy Records was founded by Sean "Diddy" Combs, positioning itself as the new face of East Coast hip-hop, polished, commercial, and dominant on radio and television. At first, the rivalry between the East Coast and West Coast was largely competitive. Different sounds, different aesthetics, different audiences. But competition became personal, and personal became dangerous. When Tupac Shakur signed with Death Row Records after his release from prison in 1995, he didn't just join a label. He entered a conflict. Tupac Shakur's relationship with Death Row Records intensified his existing grievances, particularly those stemming from his 1994 shooting in New York City. Tupac Shakur publicly expressed belief that people connected to Bad Boy Records had prior knowledge of that shooting. Although no court ever established responsibility, the accusation itself reshaped hip-hop's landscape. Lyrics became sharper. Interviews became confrontational. Music videos turned into declarations. The media amplified everything. Magazines, radio shows, and television outlets framed the tension as a full-scale war, East Coast versus West Coast, reducing complex personal disputes into a dramatic narrative that sold headlines. And the artists became symbols. On the West Coast, Tupac Shakur became the most visible and outspoken figure. On the East Coast, the notorious B.I.G. became the face of Bad Boy Records. The conflict was no longer just about music. It was about loyalty. It was about pride. It was about survival. Contemporary interviews from that era show how fast the tone shifted. Tupac Shakur openly criticized Bad Boy Records and Sean Combs in public appearances. Marion "Suge" Knight used award show stages to mock rival executives and question their authenticity. These moments weren't accidents. They were calculated. Every statement fueled tension. Every lyric was dissected for hidden messages. Every public appearance carried risk. Behind the scenes, the rivalry overlapped with real-world affiliations. Death Row Records had documented connections to individuals associated with Mob Peru Bloods, a Los Angeles street gang. Some figures around Bad Boy Records had associations, direct or indirect, with individuals tied to East Coast street networks. This overlap mattered, because once street politics entered the music industry, disputes no longer stayed verbal. Threats were no longer metaphorical. Security concerns became constant. Tupac Shakur leaned fully into the death row identity. His lyrics grew more confrontational, his interviews more defiant, his public persona more aggressive. To supporters, he was standing his ground. To critics, he was escalating a conflict that could not be controlled. The media played a central role. Television programs framed the feud as entertainment. Radio hosts debated sides. Magazine covers reinforced the narrative of a cultural war. Rarely did coverage emphasize de-escalation. Conflict sold. And Tupac Shakur, already living under pressure, was now carrying the weight of an entire coast's identity. This period also reshaped how Tupac Shakur was perceived. The trained poet, the sensitive actor, the politically aware artist. Those images faded behind the louder narrative of rivalry and aggression. But those earlier parts of him never disappeared. They were buried under expectation, under loyalty, under retaliation, under pride. By 1996, the feud had reached a boiling point. The lines were drawn, associations were known, and the stakes were no longer just reputational. They were lethal. When Tupac Shakur traveled to Las Vegas in September 1996 to attend the Mike Tyson fight, he wasn't just attending a sporting event. He was moving through a landscape shaped by unresolved tension, public hostility, and real-world affiliations. The East Coast/West Coast feud didn't pull the trigger, but it created the conditions. It normalized aggression. It rewarded confrontation. It blurred the boundary between music and violence. And it ensured that when something finally happened, the fallout would be massive. Because this wasn't just about Tupac Shakur. It was about an industry that let rivalry spiral unchecked. And the consequences were waiting, just hours away. September 7, 1996. Las Vegas, Nevada. The day begins like a celebration. Tupac Shakur is in Las Vegas for one reason: the Mike Tyson vs. Bruce Seldon heavyweight championship fight at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. Mike Tyson is closely affiliated with Marion "Suge" Knight, and the fight is one of the most anticipated boxing events of the year. By early evening, Tupac Shakur is seen around Las Vegas with members of Death Row Records, including Suge Knight and several associates. Security is present, but the atmosphere is relaxed. No one publicly suggests this night will end in violence. Tupac Shakur arrives at the MGM Grand Hotel and Casino shortly before the fight. Surveillance footage later confirms his presence inside the hotel. He is wearing a black jersey, jewelry visible, surrounded by members of his entourage. He is easily recognizable. Fans notice him immediately. This matters because nothing about Tupac Shakur's movements that night is discreet. Mike Tyson enters the ring. The crowd is electric. Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight are seated ringside. The fight itself is brief. Mike Tyson defeats Bruce Seldon in less than 2 minutes by first-round knockout. The event ends quickly. The crowd begins to disperse. This is when the night shifts. After the fight, Tupac Shakur, Suge Knight, and their group move through the MGM Grand lobby. Surveillance cameras capture what happens next. Tupac Shakur notices Orlando Anderson, also known as Baby Lane, a known affiliate of the South Side Compton Crips. Earlier intelligence and later testimony suggest Orlando Anderson had been involved in an incident months earlier involving the theft of a Death Row Records chain. Words are exchanged. Then violence erupts. Tupac Shakur physically attacks Orlando Anderson. Suge Knight joins in. Several members of the Death Row entourage participate. The fight is brief but intense. Hotel security intervenes. Orlando Anderson escapes the scene. The entire altercation is caught on MGM Grand surveillance footage. This moment becomes one of the most important events in the entire case, because it establishes a public confrontation, a clear motive for retaliation, a known individual involved hours before the shooting. Yet at the time, no arrests are made. Tupac Shakur leaves the MGM Grand. He does not appear concerned. Tupac Shakur exits the hotel with Suge Knight. They plan to attend a Death Row Records party later that night at Club 662, owned by Suge Knight. Tupac Shakur changes clothes. He is now wearing a black vest, gold chain, and baggy jeans. He gets into a black BMW 750 IL, driven by Suge Knight. Tupac Shakur is in the front passenger seat. They leave the MGM Grand property. Traffic is heavy. Las Vegas Boulevard is crowded with post-fight congestion. The BMW moves slowly. At one point, Tupac Shakur is seen interacting with fans through the open window. Photographs are taken. This moment becomes one of the last known images of Tupac Shakur alive. The car turns eastbound. Their destination remains Club 662. The BMW approaches the intersection of East Flamingo Road and Colville Lane. The traffic light is red. The car comes to a stop. This location is critical. It is well lit, public, surrounded by other vehicles. A white four-door Cadillac pulls up on the right side of the BMW. Witnesses later report the Cadillac had tinted windows. The passenger window lowers. Gunfire erupts. Multiple shots are fired from the Cadillac into the BMW. Tupac Shakur is struck 4 times. Bullets hit him in the chest, arm, and thigh. One round punctures his right lung. Suge Knight is grazed by shrapnel or glass, but remains conscious. The Cadillac speeds away. No immediate pursuit. Chaos follows. Cars scatter. Witnesses panic. Suge Knight drives several blocks before stopping and seeking help. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police respond to reports of a shooting. Tupac Shakur is found bleeding heavily. He is conscious but struggling. He is transported by ambulance to University Medical Center of Southern Nevada. Doctors work to stabilize Tupac Shakur. He undergoes emergency surgery. His right lung is removed. He is placed on life support. Despite efforts, his condition remains critical. The case is now officially a homicide investigation. But in the first hours, crucial problems emerge. Witnesses are uncooperative. Descriptions of the Cadillac vary. No weapon is recovered. No suspects are immediately detained. The man who was one of the most famous artists in the world has been shot on a busy Las Vegas street, and no one is talking. Everything that happens after September 7, 1996, traces back to these moments. The MGM Grand fight. The public confrontation with Orlando Anderson. The lack of immediate arrests. The escape of the white Cadillac. This night does not exist in isolation. It is the collision point of fame, rivalries, street affiliations, missed opportunities. By the time the sun rises over Las Vegas, Tupac Shakur is fighting for his life. And the clock on justice has already started ticking. In the minutes after the gunfire on East Flamingo Road and Colville Lane, the reality of what had just happened begins to settle in. Tupac Amaru Shakur is slumped in the front passenger seat of the black BMW. He has been struck by 4 gunshots. One bullet has entered his chest, puncturing his right lung. Another has hit his arm. Another has struck his thigh. A 4th round has caused additional internal damage. Blood fills the interior of the vehicle. Glass is shattered. Traffic is frozen. Marion Suge Knight, who was driving, has been grazed by shrapnel or debris, but is still conscious and able to move. Rather than waiting in the intersection, Suge Knight drives several blocks away from the shooting scene, stopping where help can be reached. Police and emergency responders arrive within minutes. When officers approach the car, they find Tupac Shakur still alive. He is struggling to breathe. Witnesses later report that he appears conscious but fatting. Paramedics rush Tupac Shakur into an ambulance. The destination is University Medical Center of Southern Nevada, the nearest level I trauma center. The drive is urgent. Every second matters. Shortly after 11:30 p.m., Tupac Shakur arrives at the hospital. Doctors immediately assess the severity of his injuries. The damage is extensive. His right lung has collapsed. Internal bleeding is severe. Vital signs are unstable. Surgeons make the decision to operate immediately. Tupac Shakur is taken into emergency surgery. During the operation, doctors remove his right lung in an attempt to save his life. He survives the surgery, but his condition remains critical. He is placed on life support. A medically induced coma follows. The shooting of Tupac Shakur is now national news. Within hours, radio stations interrupt programming. Television networks break into regular broadcasts. Newsrooms across the world scramble for confirmation. By early morning on September 8, 1996, the public learns that Tupac Shakur has been shot in Las Vegas and is in critical condition. Outside the hospital, fans begin to gather. Some pray. Some cry. Some refuse to believe it. Inside, security is increased. Access to Tupac Shakur is tightly controlled. Only a small circle of family and close associates are allowed near him. For the next 6 days, the world waits. Updates are scarce. Doctors issue cautious statements. Tupac Shakur's condition fluctuates. At times, there are reports of slight improvement. At others, silence. Rumors spread rapidly. Some claim he is recovering. Others claim he has already died. None of it is confirmed. Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mother, remains close. She authorizes medical decisions as his condition worsens. At one point, Tupac Shakur is briefly conscious after surgery. Medical staff later confirm that his injuries are too severe to overcome. Complications set in. His body struggles to recover from the trauma. On Friday, September 13, 1996, Tupac Shakur's condition rapidly declines. At 4:03 p.m., Tupac Amaru Shakur is pronounced dead. He is 25 years old. The official cause of death is listed as complications from multiple gunshot wounds, including respiratory failure and cardiopulmonary arrest. The announcement sends shockwaves across the globe. Hip-hop radio stations fall silent. MTV interrupts programming. Newspapers rush out special editions. Fans gather in cities across the United States, Los Angeles, New York, Oakland, lighting candles, holding vigils and blasting Tupac Shakur's music into the streets. For many, the loss feels personal. For others, it feels symbolic. A voice that spoke openly about pain, injustice, and survival has been violently silenced. Almost immediately, questions overshadow grief. Who did this? Why did it happen in such a public place? How did the shooters escape so easily? Why were there no arrests? Las Vegas Metropolitan Police open a homicide investigation. But problems are evident from the start. Witnesses are reluctant to cooperate. Descriptions of the suspect vehicle are inconsistent. No firearm is recovered. No suspect is taken into custody. Despite Tupac Shakur being one of the most famous people in the world, the investigation stalls almost immediately. The case begins drifting toward uncertainty. The reaction is overwhelming. Artists speak out. Fans flood radio call-in shows. Media outlets debate the meaning of Tupac Shakur's death. Some blame the East Coast/West Coast feud. Some blame Death Row Records. Some blame the industry itself. Conspiracy theories begin forming almost instantly. But beneath the speculation is a simple, undeniable truth. Tupac Shakur survived 6 days after being shot, and in that time, the opportunity for answers began slipping away. No final statement. No identification of the shooter. No closure. Just silence. And as the world mourns, the case that would define a generation quietly begins its long descent into mystery. Because Tupac Shakur's death was no longer just a tragedy. It was an unsolved homicide. And the questions were only beginning. When Tupac Amaru Shakur died on September 13, 1996, the responsibility to deliver answers fell to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. From the outside, it appeared straightforward. A drive-by shooting. A known location. Multiple witnesses. A high-profile victim. But almost immediately, the investigation ran into resistance. The first hours. Police secured the area near East Flamingo Road and Colville Lane. Shell casings were collected. Witness statements were requested. Traffic cameras and nearby surveillance were reviewed. But critical problems emerged fast. The shooter vehicle, described as a white 4-door Cadillac, had vanished without a trace. Witness descriptions conflicted. Some reported multiple shooters. Others reported only one. Window tint, license plate details, and direction of escape varied. No weapon was recovered. No physical evidence directly linked a suspect to the scene. Even more damaging, witnesses were reluctant to cooperate. Some refused formal statements. Others recanted. Many claimed they saw nothing. This silence was not accidental. Witness fear and street reality. Las Vegas police quickly recognized a familiar pattern. This was not just a celebrity case. It was a case intersecting with gang affiliations, real or perceived. People who knew something were afraid. Fear of retaliation outweighed trust in the system. Some witnesses reportedly expressed concern about being labeled informants, facing consequences from gang-connected individuals, being drawn into a high-profile, dangerous investigation. Without cooperation, leads stalled. Investigators reviewed MGM Grand surveillance footage showing the physical altercation earlier that night involving Tupac Shakur, Marion Suge Knight, and Orlando Anderson. This footage clearly established a confrontation occurred. Orlando Anderson was involved. The altercation happened hours before the shooting. Police interviewed Orlando Anderson. He denied involvement in the shooting. At the time, investigators did not file charges. Without physical evidence tying him to the gunfire, the lead went cold. This moment would later become one of the most scrutinized decisions in the entire case. Another obstacle was jurisdiction. The shooting occurred in Las Vegas, but key individuals were from California. Gang intelligence crossed state lines. Some witnesses lived outside Nevada. Coordination between agencies was limited. Information did not flow easily. Potential intelligence held by other jurisdictions was not always shared or pursued aggressively. As days turned into weeks, momentum faded. The celebrity factor made everything harder. Tupac Shakur was not a private citizen. Every investigative move was watched. Every leak became a headline. Police faced pressure from media outlets, record labels, attorneys, public speculation. At the same time, those close to Tupac Shakur were often advised by legal counsel to remain silent. Silence legally smart, but devastating for investigators. By the late 1990s, the case was officially unsolved. No suspects charged. No weapon found. No definitive answers. As time passed, witness memories faded. Physical evidence lost relevance. People involved died or disappeared. Then, in 2002, the case was reopened in the public eye. In 2002, the Los Angeles Times published a multi-part investigative series examining the murders of Tupac Shakur and the notorious B.I.G. The reporting was explosive. It criticized early investigative failures, including limited pursuit of certain leads, over-reliance on uncooperative witnesses, missed opportunities to act on gang-related intelligence. The investigation alleged that individuals tied to Southside Compton Crips may have been involved and questioned why stronger action was not taken earlier. While the Los Angeles Times reporting did not result in immediate arrests, it reshaped public understanding of the case. It suggested the truth may have been visible early, but unreachable due to fear, complexity, and institutional hesitation. Las Vegas police disputed aspects of the reporting, but acknowledged the investigation had stalled. The Tupac Shakur murder became a textbook example of why high-profile cases go cold. Witness fear prevents cooperation. Gang dynamics silence communities. Jurisdictional barriers slow intelligence sharing. Celebrity pressure complicates procedure. Early delays become permanent obstacles. In homicide investigations, time is everything. And in this case, time was lost. By the early 2000s, the murder of Tupac Shakur had become something else entirely. Not just an unsolved case. A cultural wound. A symbol of unanswered violence. For years, the file remained open but dormant. No arrests. No courtroom. No closure. Until decades later, when a single development would force the case back into the spotlight and change everything. As the investigation into the murder of Tupac Amaru Shakur stalled, one thing filled the silence left behind by unanswered questions. Names. Some appeared in police files. Some in media investigations. Some only in rumors repeated so often they began to sound like fact. Separating truth from speculation became almost impossible. But there is one name that consistently stands at the center of the discussion. Orlando Anderson, also known as Baby Lane, was a known affiliate of the Southside Compton Crips. His name entered the timeline long before the shooting, inside the MGM Grand Hotel on the night of September 7, 1996. As established earlier, surveillance footage shows Tupac Shakur physically attacking Orlando Anderson in the hotel lobby following the Mike Tyson fight. This was not hearsay. It was captured on video. The altercation is widely viewed as one of the clearest motive-based events tied to the shooting later that night. Following Tupac Shakur's death, Orlando Anderson was interviewed by law enforcement. He denied any involvement. No weapon was recovered. No eyewitness identified him as the shooter. No forensic evidence tied him to the scene. As a result, Orlando Anderson was never charged in the murder of Tupac Shakur. In 1998, Orlando Anderson was killed in an unrelated shooting in Compton, California. His death ensured that, legally, he would never stand trial for Tupac Shakur's murder. To this day, Anderson's role remains one of the most debated aspects of the case, heavily suspected in public discussion, but never proven in court. One of the most widely discussed theories is gang retaliation. This theory centers on the idea that the MGM Grand altercation humiliated Orlando Anderson and violated street codes that demanded a response. Supporters of this theory point to the public nature of the beating, known gang affiliations, the timing of the shooting only hours later. This theory has been referenced in multiple investigative reports, including media investigations and later court filings. However, it is important to be clear. While gang-related retaliation is considered a credible investigative theory, it was not conclusively established at the time of the original investigation. There were no arrests, no convictions, no courtroom findings. Another category of theories involves the music industry itself. Some have speculated that rivalries between record labels, particularly Death Row Records and Bad Boy Records, played a role. These theories often point to escalating public feuds, aggressive media narratives, financial power struggles. However, there is no direct evidence that any music executive ordered or carried out the shooting of Tupac Shakur. Law enforcement has never charged anyone in the music industry with involvement in the crime. While the industry rivalry created an atmosphere of hostility, it remains context, not proof. No high-profile murder escapes conspiracy theories, and the death of Tupac Shakur is no exception. Some claim Tupac Shakur staged his own death. Others suggest shadowy government involvement. Some believe multiple shooters or secret hit squads were involved. These theories persist largely because the case remained unsolved for decades. Witnesses were silent. Official answers were limited. But they lack verifiable evidence. No physical proof. No credible witnesses. No confirmed documentation. They exist primarily in speculation, internet forums, and popular culture, not in court records. There are only a few facts that remain firmly grounded in evidence. Tupac Shakur was shot on September 7, 1996, in Las Vegas. The shooting followed a physical altercation with Orlando Anderson earlier that night. The suspect vehicle was a white, four-door Cadillac. The shooter or shooters were never identified at the time. No arrest was made for decades. Everything beyond that exists on a spectrum, from strongly suggested to purely speculative. The absence of resolution created space. Space for rumors. Space for myth-making. Space for narratives that filled the emotional gap left by unanswered questions. Tupac Shakur was not just a victim. He was a symbol. And symbols invite interpretation. As years passed, theories hardened into beliefs. People chose the version that made the most sense to them, emotionally, culturally, or politically. But the truth does not care about belief. It depends on evidence. And for decades, that evidence never reached a courtroom. Until the case resurfaced. Until long silent names returned to headlines. Until the story of Tupac Shakur entered a new phase, one that would force the world to reconsider what it thought it knew. Because the next development would not come from rumors. It would come from the justice system itself. When Tupac Amaru Shakur died on September 13, 1996, the investigation stalled. But the story did not. In fact, it multiplied. The absence of answers created something powerful, a vacuum. And the media rushed to fill it. Almost immediately, Tupac Shakur's murder stopped being treated as a single crime and started being framed as a cultural event. News outlets replayed the same footage. Magazine covers reused the same images. Radio shows debated the same unanswered questions. But without arrests or court proceedings, Repetition turned into speculation. Speculation turned into mythology. Tupac Shakur became the archetype of the martyred artist, a voice of truth silenced before his time. This narrative took hold quickly. He was young. He was outspoken. He was controversial. And he died violently. Those elements formed the foundation of a legend. Over the years, numerous documentaries attempted to explain Tupac Shakur's life and death. Films such as Tupac, Resurrection focused on his upbringing, beliefs, and inner conflicts, using his own words to humanize him beyond the headlines. Other documentaries leaned heavily into the mystery of his death, revisiting the MGM Grand altercation, the white Cadillac, the lack of arrests. Each project promised new insight. Some offered context. Others leaned into suspense. Very few delivered definitive answers. These productions kept the case alive, but also reinforced the idea that the truth was always just out of reach. Several investigative books and long-form reports shaped public understanding of the case. Works like Greg Kading's murder rap and extensive newspaper investigations revisited gang-related theories and alleged confessions, drawing from interviews, law enforcement experience, and public records. These works influenced how many people viewed the case, especially while official investigations remained inactive. However, it is important to be clear. Books are not verdicts. They present interpretations, not judicial conclusions. Some claims sparked renewed interest. Others sparked controversy. None replaced the need for courtroom evidence. As the internet grew, the Tupac Shakur mystery entered a new phase. Forums, message boards, and later social media platforms became breeding grounds for theories. Some users analyzed lyrics for hidden messages. Others examined photographs frame by frame. Some claimed Tupac Shakur faked his own death and was still alive. These theories spread rapidly, not because they were supported by evidence, but because they filled emotional gaps. The longer the case went unsolved, the easier it became to believe something extraordinary must be true. Reality felt insufficient. One of the most persistent conspiracies is the claim that Tupac Shakur staged his own death. Supporters point to posthumous album releases, symbolism in lyrics, the absence of a public funeral. But these claims collapse under scrutiny. There is no verified evidence supporting the idea that Tupac Shakur survived his injuries. Medical records, death certificates, and eyewitness accounts from hospital staff all confirm his death on September 13, 1996. The persistence of this theory speaks less about facts and more about grief. People were not ready to let him go. Films, music, and fashion continued to elevate Tupac Shakur's image. His music charted long after his death. Murals appeared worldwide. His lyrics were quoted like scripture. Each new generation encountered Tupac Shakur not as a man, but as an idea. Revolutionary, victim, prophet. The mystery surrounding his death amplified his presence. Unanswered questions kept him relevant. In popular culture, closure often ends interest. Uncertainty sustains it. But mythmaking has consequences. As Tupac Shakur became larger than life, the actual homicide investigation faded further into the background. Real people, witnesses, family members, investigators were replaced by characters in a story. Speculation overshadowed evidence. Emotion replaced procedure. The case became entertainment. And entertainment does not require resolution. Understanding the media's role is essential to understanding why the murder of Tupac Shakur remained unresolved for so long. The mystery made him immortal, but it also buried forced accountability. For decades, Tupac Shakur existed in two forms. A real man who was murdered on a Las Vegas street. A symbol endlessly reinterpreted by culture. Only one of those versions needed justice. And justice does not come from documentaries, books, or theories. It comes from evidence, testimony, and the law. For a long time, that seemed impossible. Until the story shifted again. Because after years of speculation, something finally happened that pulled the case out of myth and back into reality. After Tupac Shakur's death in 1996, the investigation stalled almost immediately. Witnesses were silent. Leads went cold. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department struggled with the combination of gang affiliations, celebrity scrutiny, and jurisdictional complexities. In 2002, the Los Angeles Times conducted a multi-part investigative series revisiting the murder. The reporting examined earlier investigations, handling of witness cooperation, connections between Tupac Shakur, Death Row Records, and Southside Compton Crips associates, possible links between the MGM Grand altercation and subsequent shooting. While the reporting did not result in arrests, it highlighted key failures in early investigative efforts and renewed public interest in the case. For years, the case remained officially unsolved, but law enforcement continued to pursue leads quietly. Investigative journalists, books, and documentaries revisited the case repeatedly, identifying potential suspects and gang connections. Much of this reporting focused on Orlando, Baby Lane, Anderson, and others affiliated with the Southside Compton Crips, but no charges were filed against him, and he was killed in 1998 in an unrelated shooting. The absence of arrests fueled ongoing public speculation and conspiracy theories. Decades later, in September 2023, a major legal development occurred. Duane Keffe D. Davis, long tied in media reporting to the Las Vegas shooting, was arrested and charged in connection with the murder of Tupac Shakur. According to official reports, Davis was indicted on charges of murder related to Tupac Shakur's death. This indictment included gang enhancement allegations, reflecting his alleged affiliation with a gang at the time. Following the arrest, Davis pleaded not guilty. Davis has publicly given interviews acknowledging knowledge of the incident, but denying direct involvement in the act of shooting. The arrest represents a significant milestone in the case. For law enforcement, it marks a reopening of formal legal proceedings in a murder that remained unsolved for 27 years. For the public, it brings renewed attention, scrutiny, and speculation, but it is not a verdict. It is crucial to understand the distinction between legal action and public perception. An arrest and indictment allows prosecutors to present evidence in court. Requires a defendant to answer to charges formally. In unlike legal processes such as hearings, pretrial motions, and potentially a trial. But an arrest alone does not confirm guilt. Public reaction often conflates arrest with resolution, but the judicial system is bound by due process. Evidence must be presented in court. The defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Outcomes could range from conviction to acquittal or plea arrangements. In the case of Tupac Shakur, the 2023 arrest brings one step closer to potential legal answers, but decades of myth, speculation, and incomplete investigation mean that public closure may still lag behind legal proceedings. The arrest of Duane Keffe D. Davis demonstrates several points about this case. This passage of time does not preclude legal action. Investigative journalism and public scrutiny can maintain pressure on law enforcement. Complex cases involving celebrity, gangs, and cross-jurisdictional issues require persistence and patience. For the family of Tupac Shakur, for fans worldwide, and for the music industry, The arrest is both a reminder of long-held grief and a symbol that the pursuit of accountability is ongoing. Even as the legal process unfolds, the murder of Tupac Shakur remains not just a criminal case, but a defining cultural moment, a collision of fame, violence, and legend that continues to capture attention decades later. The next phase of the story is not just about music or myth. It is about justice finally attempting to catch up with a crime that has haunted America's cultural consciousness for nearly 3 decades. Nearly 3 decades after Tupac Amaru Shakur was murdered, the case remains one of the most scrutinized in modern American history. Even with the 2023 arrest of Duane, Keffe D. Davis, many critical questions remain unanswered. Understanding what investigators had, and what they never obtained, is essential to grasping why the case has remained so elusive. Strongest pieces of evidence. 1. MGM Grand altercation video. The surveillance footage from September 7, 1996, clearly shows Tupac Shakur physically attacking Orlando "Baby Lane" Anderson in the MGM Grand lobby. Confirms a public confrontation hours before the shooting. Establishes motive for potential retaliation. Shows Anderson's presence and demeanor. Although this is not proof of the shooting itself, it remains one of the clearest documented events connected to that night. Eyewitness reports. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a white, 4-door Cadillac in the vicinity of the shooting. Descriptions of the vehicle's direction, occupants, and speed vary. Some witnesses identified the Cadillac as the source of gunfire. Others were unable to confirm details, citing fear of retaliation. While eyewitness testimony is inherently fallible, the recurring description of the Cadillac establishes a strong link to the type of vehicle involved. Through ballistics and medical evidence. Tupac Shakur was struck by 4 rounds, including chest, arm, and thigh wounds. Hospital records confirm the severity of injuries, surgical interventions, and ultimate cause of death. Slug types and trajectories were analyzed, showing multiple shots fired from the passenger side of a vehicle. This evidence is undisputed and provides the foundation for any homicide investigation. Gang affiliations and associations. Investigators noted connections between Orlando Anderson, the South Side Compton Crips, and associates of Duane, Keffe D. Davis. Police and investigative reporting have consistently highlighted these relationships as potential avenues of motive. These associations remain circumstantial, but are corroborated by multiple law enforcement reports and later journalistic investigations, including the 2002 Los Angeles Times series and Greg Kading's investigative work. Weak links and gaps. 1. No weapon recovered. No firearm linked to the shooting was ever found. This is a major gap in forensic evidence, leaving the method of the attack partially unverified. 2. Eyewitness reliability. Fear of gang retaliation, limited cooperation. Conflicting accounts made it difficult to establish a clear timeline or confirm the identities of occupants in the Cadillac. 3. Late confessions and testimonies. Duane Keffe D. Davis has publicly given statements claiming knowledge of the events, but these remain untested in court. Others have provided delayed interviews or anecdotal accounts decades later. Legal standards require corroboration and admissibility, so these statements alone cannot confirm the full truth. 4. Jurisdiction and evidence loss. Some physical evidence from 1996 was limited in quantity and degraded over time. Witnesses and potential informants moved, died, or became unreachable. Early investigative missteps compounded these gaps, leaving significant unanswered questions. Even with an arrest in 2023, skepticism is widespread among law enforcement observers, journalists, and fans. Legal standards require proof beyond a reasonable doubt, not just suspicion or public statements. Potential plea bargains or strategic statements by suspects may obscure what actually happened. Reliability of late confessions can be compromised by memory, personal agendas, or legal strategy. Public perception often fills gaps with speculation, myth-making, and conspiracy theories. For many, the arrest is a starting point, not a conclusion. The strongest evidence is historical, documented, and verifiable, but gaps remain in testimony, forensics, and timing. The absence of direct identification of the shooter at the time of the crime, combined with the decades-long delay in legal action, ensures that the full story may never be completely accessible to the public. The Tupac Shakur case illustrates why high-profile crimes can remain unresolved. Fear silences witnesses. Complex networks obscure motives. Time erodes physical evidence. Public fascination creates myth alongside fact. Even as law enforcement pursues justice, the story that reaches the public is inevitably incomplete. And in the case of Tupac Shakur, those gaps have shaped not only the investigation, but also the legend that surrounds him. Because in this case, what is missing is as important as what is known. The unanswered questions, the white Cadillac, the exact shooter, and the timing of decisions in the early investigation continue to fuel discussion and speculation. And they remind the world that some truths, even decades later, remain just out of reach. The story of Tupac Amaru Shakur does not end with his death on September 13, 1996. Even decades later, his presence resonates in music, poetry, activism, and culture worldwide. Cultural legacy. Tupac Shakur was more than a rapper. A poet, influenced by the Black Panther movement through his mother Keffe Shakur, he expressed social and political commentary in ways that were rare in mainstream hip-hop. An activist, calling attention to racial injustice, poverty, and systemic oppression. An artist blending rap with acting, from films like Juice and Poetic Justice, showing a depth beyond the music stage. His albums, including Tupacalypse Now, Strictly For My Niggaz, Me Against the World, and All Eyes on Me, did more than dominate charts. They voiced struggle, defiance, and hope, echoing long after each track dropped. Tupac Shakur's influence is evident in artists citing him as a role model in lyrical content and activism, music videos and lyrics reflecting the social commentary he championed, discussions about authenticity, struggle, and artistry in hip-hop culture, how his death reshaped industry conversations. Tupac Shakur's murder highlighted the collision of celebrity, rivalry, and real-world violence. It forced the music industry to confront the dangers of East Coast/West Coast feuds. Record labels, media outlets, and public figures began reevaluating security and conflict management. Conversations about the responsibility of the industry to protect artists became more prominent. But the tragedy also exposed the human cost behind headlines. Friends and family lost a son, a brother, a confidant. Fellow artists lost a peer whose influence shaped an entire generation. Fans worldwide lost a voice that bridged music, poetry, and activism. The ongoing mystery. Even now, questions remain. Who fired the fatal shots that night in Las Vegas? What exactly transpired in the hours following the MGM Grand altercation? How much of the truth will emerge through legal proceedings or confessions? These questions fuel curiosity, discussion, and debate, and they ensure that Tupac Shakur's story continues to captivate. Reflection. Tupac Shakur's life and death are reminders that behind cultural icons are humans, vulnerable, complex, and irreplaceable. The unresolved elements of his murder underscore the consequences of violence, fear, and silence. They remind us that fame and talent cannot insulate anyone from the realities of the world around them. And they call attention to the ongoing need for justice, even decades later. If you learn something new, like comment and subscribe to Tailies of the Real. Drop a comment. What theory do you find most convincing and why? Hit the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into another mystery.